Welcome to Justice Beyond the Bench, a podcast by the International Association of Women Judges. I'm Jane Charles Voltaire.
And I'm Amy Lewis. In this series, we spotlight women across the global justice sector who are leading efforts to advance gender equality, strengthen judicial systems, and champion inclusive leadership.
From courtrooms to communities, we'll hear powerful stories and unpack the strategies shaping women's leadership in law and the judiciary. It's time to go beyond the bench.
Today, we welcome a wonderful IAWJ leader, Justice Binta Nyako. Here's a question. What does it take to serve justice in a system shaped by cultural, religious, and political pressures, while also breaking barriers for women in law?
From the courtrooms of northern Nigeria to leading women judges globally, today we hear a story of courage, vision, and change.
Justice Binta Nyako's story begins in northern Nigeria, where she became the first woman from Katsina State to study law. What started as a bold step into uncharted territory quickly turned into a career of firsts.
She rose from state counsel to solicitor general, then became attorney general and commissioner for justice in her home state. By 2000, she was appointed to the Federal High Court of Nigeria, where she has served for more than 2 decades.
Along the way, she has broken barrier after barrier.
And her courage has been tested in some of the most difficult cases imaginable. In 2018, she presided over terrorism trials in Katsina, Niger State, cases that place both the judiciary and her own resilience in the global spotlight.
But her leadership extends beyond the courtroom. Justice Nyako has served as president of the National Association of Women Judges Nigeria and as president of the International Association of Women Judges, the first Muslim woman to lead this global network.
And at every stage, she has opened doors for women in law, expanded access to justice, and reminded us that judicial leadership is about courage, integrity, and vision.
We are honored to welcome her today, Justice Binta Nyako. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.
Welcome, Justice Nyako.
Thank you for having me. We're excited to speak with you today. And so, just to really set the stage and open things up, let's begin with your path to the bench. Looking back, was there a defining moment where you understood that becoming a judge wasn't simply the next step in your career, but your true calling?
It's a long story. I'd say that when I was a young child, I always had this tendency to settle disputes. Locally, my family used to call me the lawyer. I never thought it was going to metamorphose to my becoming a judge. When I left the office of Attorney General, I set up private practice on my own in a place where it's predominantly dominated by male. And like you said in my introduction, being the first female to have studied law from Katsina State, indigenous Katsina State person, it was a very Herculean task. I had to fight my way through the ulama being the Islamic clerics, who didn't think it was in a woman's place to administer law or justice. It was a male-dominated sphere. And if I had to take some very difficult decisions, I had to face them on it, and I had to use the opportunity to go and study the Islamic perspective, because Katsina State, like you said, is a predominantly Muslim state in Nigeria. So I needed to go and study the Islamic perspective of any issue that was on ground, that was a big problem on ground. But with the support of my governors and the elders, I was able to scale through. So when I had to come to the Federal High Court, the first hurdle was, first of all, to get nominated and then subsequently appointed. The then Chief Judge of the Federal High Court then, may his soul rest in peace, as we say here, Justice Belgore, he told us in confidence that I wasn't very keen on having women on the Federal High Court bench because women resisted postings, women had to go for maternity leaves, women had to take time off because their husbands or their family or their children needed special feminine or mother or wife attention. And he wasn't really keen. But the same Justice Belgore, after appointing 5 women to the Federal High Court bench at the same time, came back to tell us that he regretted his past stance of not appointing women, that he was so happy that he had appointed us. because we now put so many things in place. We now brought in the feminine touch into the Federal High Court, and we made it more of a family court. Everybody was everybody's brother and brother's keeper. So that was the first barrier we needed to break through. And of the 5 women that came on board at the same time, that's me inclusive, I was the only female from the North, and I was the only Muslim female. So even that, as it were, was something that was like a standout. So I needed to blend, or I needed to enforce my own stance on a lot of issues. So little things that people would take for granted. I had to wear very long skirts. I wouldn't wear short skirts to sit. I had my hair covered at all times, and I usually carried a scarf. And gradually, some of my colleagues started actually emulating what I was doing. So little bits of stuff like that, bringing me onto the bench, was something that I think when I meet a lot of young judges now, they tell me that I was an inspiration to them, especially those from the North who thought that as Muslim women, they could not participate on the bench. So I'm very happy, and I'm glad that some people see me as a wonder for them, and that religion should not be a barrier, or culture should not be a barrier to coming onto the bench.
That's such an excellent point, Justice Nyako. You talk about enforcing your own stance on the issues and studying the Islamic perspective and really understanding, that women can serve in the courts, even from an Islamic perspective and even from a cultural perspective, and, establishing your own credibility and presence so that you could become an inspiration to those that basically told you, no, this isn't a woman's place. You have done this time and time again. And indeed, you've presided over some of Nigeria's most high-profile and politically charged cases, including terrorism and national security trials. Can you talk a little bit more about what those moments taught you about courage, impartiality, the balance between law and politics, and really taking your own stance and establishing your credibility and presence in those really high-profile cases?
I am of the view that the important thing is for you to be on the side of the law. As a judge, you don't have any alternative but to be on the side of the law. What does the law say? It doesn't matter who the personality is. You must apply the case as the law provides. I always give this example that the person who stole a goat in Nigeria is a very important animal. It's a domestic animal. It's a very stable food in Nigeria, so it's very important. So I use the goat as the example. A person who stole a goat would cost like 25 to use the American currency to establish it. And the person who stole $1 billion or $100 million, the basic thing is stealing, irrespective of what you have stolen. So you must apply the law to everybody the same, irrespective of who it is. The common man would not have the opportunity to steal $1 million. It would be the big man who would have the opportunity to steal $1 million. The big man would not look at the goat. So it's the little man who will steal the goat. But as far as I'm concerned, all of them are being charged for stealing. So what does the law say? So you apply the law in that regards. When you do cases like terrorism cases, the first thing is you probably would be afraid that you might be a target for reprisals and whatever. But somebody has to do the job. And if it's not you, it's going to be somebody else. What's the difference between you and that other person? Because you are all judges. So you must do the cases that are being assigned to you. Yes, you become a little bit more apprehensive. You are more cautious of your surroundings. You are more careful about where you go or where you are seen for your own security and also for the integrity of the cases that you are doing. So a lot of the terrorism trials that we did in Nigeria, a way different from the terrorism cases that you probably do in the United States or you do in the United Kingdom, where you have one isolated terrorist and that has been trained for a long period of time and your evidence is airtight before you go to court. In Nigeria, where you had the attacks from the Boko Haram and you are also having attacks now from the bandits and the IPOB or the ESN, as they call them, where mass attacks are taking place at the same time. Communities are being attacked. It's not just like an individual is being targeted. Communities are being attacked. So those communities must have justice. And well, it's service to the nation you're doing. That's the way I see it. It's service to the nation. So you must put in your best. and you must still bring in the law to operate. You're not just going to say, because yes, I have heard, I have seen there was a terrorist attack in this community, XYZ, so automatically they are guilty. No, you must apply the law. What does the law say? What did they do? What was the evidence before you? So these are the kind of things that you must bring to play. You're not just going to use sentiments. Even though somebody said to me, but the communities that were attacked, my relatives lost their lives and the rest. That's not the consideration of the law. Whether your relatives lost their lives or not, it's not the consideration. What does the law say? What was the offense that was committed? How do you tie the offense to the individuals? So these are the kind of things you must take into consideration, irrespective of who the defendants are. I've done a lot of high-profile cases. Yes, I don't want to start recounting them. I'm sure they are out there in the social media. Very high-profile individuals. A lot of them have even attempted to find my relatives and either intimidate them or try to bribe them or try to harass them. But my relatives cannot and will not succumb to that.
You talked about the way that communities are attacked and how that can even become personal. But you also talked about the way that communities must have justice and how, whether it's an attack from the Boko Haram or from some other terrorist group, how you tie the offense to individuals. But we also know that in these contexts of conflict, that women are often both victims and overlooked participants in the justice process. So how did those cases shape your understanding of justice for women in particular?
I served in a place in Nigeria called Benue State, and in particular a town called Makurdi. I was a single presiding judge of the Federal High Court in that. And I remember this case very well, where a group of women came to court to complain that they were nominal complainants, that their husbands were killed by, in quote, terrorists. And the prosecutors had come to say that they were, in quote again, Fulani herdsmen. You probably would have heard about them. Fulani is a tribe, but herdsmen, they are herders. They move about, they are nomadic, they move about with their cattle and the rest. And these women, the charges was that these Fulani herdsmen had attacked and killed their husband. And then these women came to court and said, our husbands were not killed by herdsmen. Our husbands were invited by some people wearing military uniforms, and they took them away into the forest, and we never saw our husbands again until a couple of days after, where some bodies were discovered in the forest, and we identified them as our husbands. So now when you have a situation like that, this is a very pathetic situation. These are women whose husbands, who are the life or the heads of the families, who are the suppliers and supporters of their families, have been eliminated by people who are of questionable origin or character. You don't know who it is. So there is sympathy, whether you like it or not, as a human being. These women have lost the heads of their families. They are rural women. They have a lot of children. I don't know what happens in America now, but in Nigeria, in the rural areas, you can find a woman with 7, 8 children. I have an auntie who had 12 single births, and they all grew up to adulthood. So if you have a situation like that, and the head of the family has been killed, you need to try and find justice for those kind of people. So even if they were not Fulani herdsmen, somebody had lured them, and somebody had killed them. So if you cannot trace them, then the state is responsible. So this is where now the justice for those kind of people comes in. If you cannot, as a prosecutor, tie up your case to individuals as defendants, then it falls back on the government. So these are the kind of situations where I, Binta, will fall back on the government and say the government did not do its job well, and that these women will be entitled to some kind of compensation, even if I cannot find the culprit.
That's a very poignant example of where access to justice, right, and visibility, and perhaps your perspective, as you said, from being a woman on the court and on the bench, can also help to really elucidate the humanity and the injustice that these women were facing because perhaps it hadn't been properly investigated from the government side. So thank you for sharing them. You've been on the bench now, Justice Nyako, for decades. When you look back at the younger judge walking into the courtroom, what do you think was perhaps misconceptions about the justice system, things that you might see differently today from that younger Judge Nyako?
I've been on the bench for 25 years now, so that's 2 decades and a half. When I first got on the bench, it was a glamorous job. I'm a judge, it sounds great. You find that being the first female from my state, I'm also the first from my family. It comes with a lot of prestige, but also comes with a lot of expectations. In my days, 25 years ago, the economy of Nigeria was relatively stable. Now what happens is that fast forward 2-3 years ago, the younger judges think this job is so glamorous. This job is going to just take care of everything that you require. Your salaries are going to be very good. The market is going to change, charge you a different price, etc., etc. But I try to tell them, I said, that is not the reality. The reality is a lot of hard work. In my court, in the Federal High Court, we have a total number of 85 judges are serving about 200 million Nigerians because the Federal High Court covers the whole of Federation of Nigeria. In some state divisions, we have just one presiding judge. In some, we have 2. Where I serve, which is in Abuja, the federal capital, we have 13 judges. But in my court alone, I have almost 600 cases. Me alone, I have like 600 cases. So the younger judges maybe have like 300. So if you take a total number of the cases that the judges in Abuja alone handle in a year, it's about 27,000 cases. It's not easy. It's a lot of hard work. You are sitting from 9 till 4. You are coming back home to write judgments and rulings and decisions. So if you think that the job is glamorous, when you become a judge, the court is going to give you a house to live in. The court is going to give you a car. It will even give you a driver. But your services, your utilities are going to come out of your salary. We have a lot of domestic staff in Nigeria. We still have not reached the level where everybody does their own job because we still live in the extended family houses with big houses and a lot of family members and support. The salary that you think you are earning is going to go into running your house, is going to go into your feeding and the rest. So when they come in and see that more that they see is just in the title, it's just in the title. The bit now, I don't want to use a negative word. Well, they're a bit downcast because they now realize their social lives have been cut out. All those nice parties, Nigerians will throw good parties.
Yes.
So all those big parties you cannot attend because you don't know who is going to be there. You can't be attending parties where you're going to be mixing with politicians and other members from the legislators and the executive. You have to avoid that. You cannot even go to the market. Sometimes I wish I could go to the market because I could now price the things the way I want to see them. And I may able to see some things in the market that I don't know even exist. But I can't go to the market because you don't know who you're going to bump into. You can't go to those parties. Your life is restricted. You can't go to a club. There was a funny situation that happened early in this year. A judge that just happened to be in a particular place. The place was raided by hoodlums and they kidnapped the man without even knowing he was a judge. And subsequently, ransom had to be paid for the man to be released. So it just shows you that your life is curtailed. You are now going to be put in a particular box where you cannot step out or you cannot venture out of it. So I tried to explain this to them. I said, you are doing sacrifice. You are doing service to your nation. So calm down. The salary may not be good enough, but better off than others. So these are part of the things. The job for a couple of years, it comes natural. There is no new case. There is no new crime. There is no new situations where there's nothing new on earth. Let me put it that way. It's just probably the way that it comes about.
Justice Nyako, you talked about how although being a judge may sound glamorous with the titles or maybe even some of the perks that come with the job, that it really is not necessarily as glamorous as it may look upon first notice. The number of cases that you have. You talked earlier about threats perhaps to your family, that there's a lot that goes into being a leader. There's a lot that goes into administering justice. And you've also led both the National Association of Women Judges of Nigeria and the International Association of Women Judges. We talked earlier about, being the first from your state, the first from your family, the first Muslim woman judge to lead IAWJ. When you first stepped into these roles, did you ever imagine the kinds of influence and responsibility that they would bring? And was there a moment that surprised you about what leadership in these spaces really means?
I don't want to say anything that has surprised me. I'd like to say something that has made me proud of having associated with the Association of Women Judges, be it at the national level or at the international level. And what has made me proud is part of the programs that the IAWJ has had over time. We have brought down to the state chapters and which we've tried to implement. In the course of implementing those programs, it opened me to a lot of happenings that ordinarily I may not have been aware of. We've done the JEP program, the Equality of Justice program, which was very interesting. The Nigerian Institute of Nigerian Judicial Institute took it over and has been implementing it. We've done the GLOW program, the Leadership of Women. If you would remember, we had a workshop on it in Ghana, but we also domesticated it in Nigeria and carried along. But one of the ones that really was of interest to me was the sextortion program, which was being run by Nancy. And it was of interest to me because it now made me realize, and I say it all the time, if your child went to school and came out with best grades, all A's, or your child went to school and came out with the worst grades, how are you convinced that it's not because your child succumbed to some sexual harassment or refused sexual harassment that had led to those bad grades or good grades, as the case may be? And I was privileged to have had the opportunity to address a group of legislators, which was led by the Speaker of the Nigerian House of Representatives. And I said to him, Mr. Speaker, may I ask a question? Why do politicians like to call meetings at 3 a.m.? When you call a meeting at 3 a.m. and you have women in politics, who will like to attend those meetings? Do you expect a married woman to leave her matrimonial home and matrimonial bed and her children and attend your meeting at 3 a.m.? I said, whether it is for sexual favors or not, it is sextortion, whether you accept it or not. And then you have somebody you call an anointer, in quotes. Anointer is a person who now determines, in Nigerian politics, who determines who stands for what offices. Now, if those women don't attend those 3 a.m. meetings, how do they get to be appointed to contest for particular offices? So you can see where my argument is coming. It's the same thing with them. Some time back, we had to convict lecturers, university lecturers, that were harassing students for sexual favors for good grade. This sextortion program opened my eyes to that kind of scenario. You know, I knew some things like that happen, but I never put it in any particular perspective. But this really opened my eyes. You have a situation where, let me even use the judiciary. You have a situation where a judge, for example, may be calling for his staff to do certain things at odd hours. I've heard of a situation where a judge was calling his married secretary to come in at 7 a.m. when the court opens at 9 to come do some work because he needed to get some things out by 9. And then when the lady, thinking it was a legitimate request, came to do the work, he attempted to attack her sexually. When these things happen, or you don't put them in perspective until somebody brings it to your attention. And I'm very happy that the IAWJ did that. I was very happy. And I carried it personally to different places when I was the national president. And I even carried it down to schools. And I keep on telling them that the logo should be stop with your hands up and showing the sign to stop. And if you don't speak out, nobody's going to know. But if you speak out, we must come together to help protect that kind of scenario, especially when we have evidence. It's not just every accusation that is backed by evidence, but we should be able to ask questions and be able to get to the bottom of some of these happenings.
With regards to not only your viewpoint in being able to support younger generations and cast some light, unfortunately, in what, from IWJ's perspective, we've seen as a scourge of, in terms of sextortion and ultimately also sexual harassment around the world. And thank you for talking about, yes, the JEP, the GLOW program, the wonderful leadership of Nancy Hendry in working with the Nigerian Association, but also your ongoing dedication to bring light to this to various communities, including younger generations. You know, that's super important that work start not only for young judges, law students, but also with younger people, you know, secondary school, etc., who are able to, as you say, have this, I love this slogan, stop, and raise awareness of what's happening so that we can address, yes, this type of behavior that we're seeing. And certainly the Willow program, the Women in Leadership and Law initiative tries to look at the ways in which, unfortunately, women at various levels of law, including in the judiciary, continue to fall victim to types of bias and behavior that isolates them and makes the environment a very harsh and negative environment in which they can be victimized.
Your leadership, Justice Nyako, in these programs has been profound, and we're so grateful even for your support with our current initiative, like Jane said, with the Women in Leadership and Law program. And you've talked a lot about how your leadership and your mentorship has shaped other women aspiring to come on the bench. And I would love for you to tell us more about, maybe in your journey, who are some of the women or key individuals that have mentored or inspired you, and how those mentorship experience shaped your own ideas about what it means to serve both on the bench and be.
Well, interestingly, we've had two women Chief Justices of Nigeria. One is currently on board. And previously, we had Justice Aluma Mariam Mukhtar, who was actually a founding member of the IAWJ together with Ali Pak. Those women have been women of, in Nigeria, we say timber and caliber. What it actually means is that you know what the timber tree is like. It's supposed to be a very hard tree and very wanted. Caliber just means they have the era, the no-nonsense stand. I don't know if they are Nigerian terminologies, but it means there is no nonsense stand about these matters. Coincidentally, the present Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Kekere Ekun, was actually 2 years my senior in the same secondary school. I've known her all my life, and she's always been a person of principles, She stands on her principles unless it is proven to her that it's otherwise. So these are women that I have seen that have really helped to shape my own opinion of my job on the Nigerian judiciary. There is also the current president of the IAWJN, who is the current president of the Court of Appeal of Nigeria, and her predecessor, Justice Bulkachua. The current president is Justice Monica Duwamensi. These are people of stamina. Coincidentally, these women, 3 of them are from the northern part of Nigeria. 2 are predominantly Muslim part of Nigeria. 1 is from the Christian part of northern Nigeria. And Justice Kekere Ekun now is from the southern part of Nigeria, but Muslim southern part of Nigeria. They've gone beyond, they've shown that you should go beyond ethnic, regional, and religious sentiments when it comes to job in the judiciary. They've given such kind of judgments that makes you proud that as a Nigerian, the industry in the judgment has shown. There is nothing sentimental about it. The law is the law. So once I have imbibed that culture from them, because I've seen it, then I think, I don't know what to say, but to say I give thanks to God for them, and for me having opportunity to study with them and to understand their perspective as to what being a judge is all about. Even as it is now, you can walk up to them and ask them questions about maybe some cases that they have handled before, or some opinion about recondite areas of the law, and they would not refuse to discuss with you. At the end of the day, you have to go back and decide any case before you based on the facts of the case and the law. So at the end of the day, even if you get a second opinion or a third opinion, the final judgment is your judgment. It's going to have a signature on it. And then if you look internationally, you have to look outside your own narrow domain and see what women have been able to achieve across the globe, in both the Western world and even in the Arab Muslim areas, where women have been able to break the ceiling. You can imbibe, you can learn lessons from them. Because you see, I've always had this thing, when you walk in a man's world, the first thing a man sees when he sees you as a woman is, oh, she's a woman. In fact, in my native Nigeria, they will tell you, I have somebody like you at home, comparing you to their wives at home, that you are only a woman. That's all they see. They don't know that you are a woman with principles. You are a woman with a difference. You are a woman that is there to change the world, to change your immediate environment, which will now metamorphose into changing the world. So these are the kind of women that I have looked up to. I pray that we still continue to have women like that. And sometimes, to be a little bit selfish, I keep on saying that I pray that I'm a woman like that. And I pray that I have done something, no matter how little, that somebody behind has looked at and thought it was good and would like to emulate that.
I think you certainly have. And And it's been wonderful to hear about your journey, but also thank you for highlighting all of these leaders within Nigeria that have really, I think, been an influence on your life. As you said, Chief Justice Kekere Kun, who was in grade school with you a few years ahead. And so being able to have that connection is such a privilege. So, Justice Nyako, from northern Nigeria to the global stage, you've seen so many different obstacles as well as opportunities, as you've just mentioned, for women entering into this profession and breaking barriers. What do you think is the next frontier for advancing women's leadership in the judiciary, whether in Africa or global?
Well, you see, I can only talk about maybe my immediate environment and see how it projects into the international environment. In a lot of climes in Africa in particular, because the judiciary is not an area where you are there to make money. It's not. There's no money in it. You end up with your salary, whether it is good or it is bad. In a lot of countries, you find that the salaries are just not anything to write home about. So you are here to do service to your country, service to your gender, service to humanity. A lot of men run away from it because there is no money in it for them to support their families, their children, and the rest. So like in Nigeria, you find that a lot of women are now coming onto the bench. A lot of women are coming onto the bench. It used to be like a very small fraction of women on the bench in Nigeria. But I think now we are way above the 35%, the affirmative action in Nigeria. We are way ahead of that. And you find that in some states, for example, there is a state in Lagos called Lagos State. I think they have like 70% of their judges there are women on the bench. So there is a lot of breakthrough because the women are more content with the little that they have. And they also have, they want to keep the good name. They want to keep the family name good and intact. They want to make a good name for their children who are coming up in the future. They don't want their children to be pointed at and made ridiculed as they grow up. So women have a lot of role and responsibility, and it's now working out for them to be on the bench. Now, because of that, you find that even the bench is now having a different perspective, a different way of looking at some certain cases. So the women angle coming into the judiciary is something that needs to be commended. I'll tell you one thing as well. Even though we have very few membership from the Muslim world, you will find that if you went and studied Sharia law, I think part of the problem we have is this language barrier and a little bit of distrust between the Arab world and the Western world, thinking that I've tried to explain to everybody that nobody's giving you any ideology. It's just a group of women that have decided to come together to better the lot of society and to help the lot of women. And I think one or two are beginning to understand it. You find that under Islamic Sharia law, you find that there are certain aspects of law that only women can actually administer. Since we are not discussing that now, we are not going to go into that argument. So to be a woman on the bench, to be a woman in the judiciary, projecting what your gender is, what your country perspective is, you will find that a lot of chief justices are now women. Nigeria has one, South Africa has one, quite a number of African countries have women chief justices. It's just that the women, like I said, try to keep a low profile, irrespective of what your status is. So I think basically for the women on the bench, kudos to them, more grace to their elbows.
You make such an incredible point, Justice Nyako, about the way that women administer justice. And we talk about this a lot at IAWJ and on this podcast about the way that who is on the bench shapes the administration of justice, the way that people see justice based on how they see who's on the bench reflected back at them, But as you have so beautifully illustrated, there is a lot of weight that comes with this responsibility, with these roles, with this leadership, and just being a judge in general. And the weight of, as you said before, the high-profile cases as well can be just personally demanding. How have you sustained your resilience over the years, and what grounds you outside of the courtroom?
I just see it as a job, and I just do it. And one thing that I have learned very early on in this job is not to have fears about whose ox is gored. If your judgment goes against government, so be it. If your judgment goes against high-profile individuals, so be it. the thing is, you must try as much as possible to live like Caesar's wife, above board. Try very hard not to compromise yourself, because once you do, then you don't have a voice anymore, because it means you have a price. But once you can look at anybody in the face and tell them the truth, then you must live above board so that they have nothing to point fingers at you against. So that is what has been my own driving force. Live above board as much as possible. Only God is perfect, I know. But you must try as an individual to also try to live above board, like I said, like Caesar's wife. So one of the things that keeps me going is the fact that I believe that I can say it as I understand it before anybody. I've had a situation when I was Attorney General at the state to tell my governor then, because he called me, that was an advice I gave. And he called me to say that the politicians were not happy with the advice. Could I please change it? And I said to him, Your Excellency, I'm sorry, I cannot change my opinion, my legal opinion. It's based on law. But you are the governor. You can do whatever you want. I will still carry my wig and gown and go to court to defend you. But my opinion on paper is not going to change, because posterity is going to judge me. Either I know the law or I don't know the law. So my opinion is not going to change because my opinion is based on the law. So what my advice to all the upcoming ones will be is try and live within your means. Try and live above board. Try and make sure that you do not tarnish your image. Do not even be associated with shady characters. Any character that has a question mark on their integrity, avoid them. So that's basically what it is.
I think that's such a wise feedback for new generations in terms of what they can bring to this service. And as you've mentioned earlier, this is a service to your nation, to your government, to the people, and the importance of that integrity. And what a wonderful legacy I think that you're leaving behind for all those that are coming up, either as judges or lawyers within the system. So, Justice Nyako, it's been such a wonderful opportunity to speak with you today. And we do have, as we're closing out, final question that we ask all of our panelists. And so, in one word, what do you think will leave the greatest impact on advancing women's leadership in law?
Integrity and hard work. That's 2 words, though.
It is 2, but that's okay. One phrase.
It's one concept, exactly.
Well, we're so grateful for you joining us today. And from local courts to international advocacy, your story reminds us that leadership is not only about titles or positions, but it's also about breaking ground where no path existed and carrying others forward with you, standing on the principle that the law is the law. From being the first woman in your state to study law, to presiding over some of the most complex trials in Nigeria, to leading women judges on the world stage, your journey is proof that courage and conviction can reshape what justice looks like for generations to come. So thank you for your commitment and thank you for your time today.
Thank you for tuning into Justice Beyond the Bench. If you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Want to learn more about our work and support our mission? Visit us at IAWJ.org, where you can explore our programs, join our global network, or make a donation to help advance gender equity in judiciaries around the world. See you next time.